There are a lot of ways to get famous, and almost as many ways to get rich. But there are infinite ways to go broke. Let's count down the 16 dumbest ways celebrities have turned fame and fortune into failure. Number 16. Dorothy Hamill. Dorothy Hamill was a champion figure skater in the mid-1970s. If you're under 40, you could be forgiven for wondering if that even qualifies her as a celebrity. But it's hard to explain how much bigger of a deal figure skating used to be. In 1993, at the end of Dorothy Hamill's career, a poll by the AP found that she was tied for the most popular athlete in America, beating out GOATs like Michael Jordan and Wayne Gretzky. The Ice-Capades are where people would go to watch pro figure skaters put on shows when they were done competing. Dorothy Hamill was their headliner in the mid-80s. But figure skating was already declining in popularity, and the Ice-Capades went bankrupt in 1991. So Dorothy Hamill took the money she'd made figure skating, and she bought the company in 1993. But she couldn't turn the show around. The audience that was left for ice shows, she had to compete with Disney for. Now, the Ice-Capades were going down, and they took Dorothy Hamill with them. Hamill went bankrupt the next year, and to pay off her debt, she sold the Ice-Capades to televangelist Pat Robertson for $10 million. And would you believe he couldn't save the Ice-Capades either? The company shut down in 1997. But Dorothy Hamill is far, far from the only celebrity whose investments didn't work out. And at least she put her money into a business she knew something about. Number 15. Burt Reynolds. Burt Reynolds is one of America's biggest stars of the 1970s. He became a Hollywood sex symbol with roles in movies like White Lightning and Smokey and the Bandit. He was voted Hollywood's most bankable star from 1978 to 82. At the top of his game, Reynolds was worth about $60 million. He was making big Hollywood money and living the life to match. Reynolds bought mansions like some celebrities buy cars. He had at least 2 in Beverly Hills, 1 in Georgia, and a waterfront estate and a ranch in Florida. But his other ventures weren't as bankable as his movies. He and a partner invested in a restaurant chain called Po Folks, which is tempting fate if you ask me. The name really wasn't the problem though, but people didn't like the food. Reynolds invested in more dodgy restaurants to get out of the hole he dug with Po Folks, and he and his partner ended up losing $20 to $30 million. With his movie career on the wane, Reynolds' finances kept going downhill. After CBS called in a $4 million loan they'd given him, Reynolds declared bankruptcy in 1996. Our next Hollywood celeb decided going bankrupt just once was for chumps. Number 14. Francis Ford Coppola. Francis Ford Coppola is known as one of the great Hollywood directors. He's probably most famous for making all 3 Godfather movies and Apocalypse Now. But the reason he's on this list isn't so much the way he went bankrupt, but the fact that he kept doing it. It started when Coppola started making a movie called One from the Heart through his production company, Zoetrope. His vision for the movie got more and more ambitious, and the budget for what started as a modest romantic comedy ballooned from $15 to $26 million. But the movie only made $600,000 at the box office. 2 years later, Coppola filed for bankruptcy the first time. He kept making movies to pay off his debts, but he couldn't get ahead of them. He had to refile for bankruptcy and still ended up almost $100 million in debt by 1990. That's when he filed for bankruptcy the 3rd time, and the last time, selling off part of his production company to clear his debt. Hopefully, that's the last time. At 84 years old, he's still making movies, and he's making them as big as possible. He says, "My technique is to just go for broke." Our next entry is another Hollywood star with a go-for-broke style. Number 11. Nicolas Cage. The incomparable Nicolas Cage is known for giving his all in every role. In fact, for a good chunk of his career, seeing Nicolas Cage on a poster was almost a guarantee of a wild performance in an otherwise blech movie. That was no coincidence. Cage rode his stardom in the 90s to an eccentric movie star lifestyle, spending his $150 million fortune on luxuries like Tyrannosaurus skulls, a collection of exotic animals including 2 cobras and an octopus, and a $4 million haunted mansion. He also invested heavily in real estate, and when the housing market collapsed in 2007, he was high and dry. He ended up owing $6 million in property taxes, and in 2009, his mansion was foreclosed on, ghosts and all. He never quite went bankrupt, but that was the start of a period in Cage's career where he would have taken pretty much any role to pay the bills, including 29 direct-to-video movies you've probably never even heard of. Number 12. Tom Petty. If you thought Hollywood contracts were shady, have you heard about the music industry? It's not uncommon for musicians to have huge hits, but end up deep in debt to their record labels because of their contract terms. That's what happened to rocker Tom Petty. He had 2 hit albums already, but realized the label that bought his contract was taking 90% of the profits. He says the label were buying and selling him like a piece of meat. I don't know how many times you can resell a piece of meat, but he was sick of it. But how was Petty going to get out of his contract? Tom Petty realized that if you go bankrupt, the courts get to rewrite all of your business arrangements. He decided to fund his next album by himself and make it as expensive as he could. He blew through $500,000 recording the album and then didn't release it. Instead, he filed for bankruptcy. His record label realized this would give a judge a chance to rewrite their contract. They were afraid if the trick worked, other musicians would try it too. So they settled out of court and offered him a much better contract, with control of his publishing rights and a guaranteed payout. But Tom Petty is the only celeb on this list who drove himself into bankruptcy on purpose. Number 11. Toni Braxton. Toni Braxton has been one of the biggest names in R&B, winning 7 Grammy Awards since she came on the scene in 1990. But that success hasn't been a smooth ride for her. Singing hits turned out to be easier than getting paid for them. In 1996, Braxton's song Unbreak My Heart spent 11 weeks at number 1 on the Hot 100, and the album went octuple platinum. But she sued her record company, saying she wasn't getting her fair cut. She lost the lawsuit though, and had to file for bankruptcy the same year. 10 years later, she had a show going for 2 years in Las Vegas and was planning to keep it going until 2010. But she had to abruptly cut it short in 2008 when she was diagnosed with a heart condition. Fortunately, Toni Braxton had bought insurance from the famous company Lloyd's of London to cover loss of income from just that kind of bad luck. Unfortunately, Lloyd's of London told her they wouldn't pay out. She sued them. Then they sued her for not sharing her full medical history with them before she took out her policy. Braxton ended up in an even deeper hole than she started with and had to file for bankruptcy again. Number 10. Marvin Gaye. Prince of Soul Marvin Gaye is another R&B star who took on a different path to going broke. Gaye is known as the seductive voice behind such date night mixtape standbys as Let's Get It On and Sexual Healing. So it's ironic that romantic troubles are what put him on this list. Marvin Gaye and his first wife separated in 1973. In 1975, he was behind on payments to his ex to the tune of $600,000, and he had to file for bankruptcy. To make things up to her, he promised to give his wife the royalties from his next album. He called the album Here, My Dear. Our next entry on this list is a man who needs no segue. Number 9. Kevin Bacon. You know Kevin Bacon. He's the Hollywood star everyone's connected to in 6 Degrees or Less. You've heard some stories so far about celebrities taking their movie earnings and making big business gambles. Kevin Bacon and his wife Kyra Sedgwick didn't do that. They put their money in a nice, boring hedge fund. A hedge fund ran by Bernie Madoff. If that name doesn't ring a bell, here's how you remember him. Bernie Madoff got people to invest in his hedge fund. Then he made off with the money. Bacon and Sedgwick weren't the only ones fooled. Madoff's Ponzi scheme stole over $10 billion. Madoff was arrested in 2008 and died in prison. But unfortunately, they still left his victims a lot more than 6 degrees away from their money. But how to get to our next celeb? Let's see. Kevin Bacon was in Black Mass with Dakota Johnson, who was in Crazy in Alabama with, number 8, Meatloaf. Meatloaf came onto the music scene like a bat out of hell with his intense rock opera style. His first album sold 34 million copies. Under the stress of touring, Meatloaf developed a bad cocaine habit. He said, "It was like some terrible curse where everything I'd ever wished for turned into a nightmare, and it was rapidly turning me into a maniac." On top of that, his next few albums didn't sell as well. He started coming into conflict with his record label and with his songwriter, Jim Steinman, who wanted more credit. This led to Steinman's ex-manager suing Meatloaf again and again. Meatloaf said, "I had 45 lawsuits totaling $80 million thrown at me. It was a game." But he said CBS wasn't paying him any royalties yet. He was only making money by touring. In 1983, to get out from under the lawsuits, Meatloaf declared bankruptcy. That cost him his house and the rights to most of his music, but he managed to come back in the 90s with a new hit album and an acting career. Number 7. Kim Basinger. 1993 was the year Meatloaf turned things around with Bat Out of Hell 2, and the same year things went downhill for Kim Basinger. Basinger pivoted from successful model to movie star in the 80s. She used her millions to go in with her family on a venture that was at least interesting. She bought the entire town of Brazelton, Georgia for $20 million with the plan to turn it into a film-centered tourist destination. But in 1993, she committed two of Hollywood's unforgivable sins. First, she turned 40. But her bigger crime was backing out of a movie. She signed on to starring in Boxing Helena, a movie about a woman who gets kidnapped. And, well, it's pretty gross. But Donna had already agreed to star in the movie and then quit. Basinger got less and less comfortable with the movie as production went on. She tried to get the script changed, and eventually she walked off too. The studio sued her and won just short of $9 million. This is around the same time that the buying a town plan started to fall apart. Basinger filed for bankruptcy and had to sell off the land she'd bought. That was rough, but the amount of money our next celeb lost blows it out of the water. Number 5. 50 Cent. 50 Cent became one of the richest rappers of all time. He came onto the scene in the early 2000s and hit it big with his first album. But where he really made his money was in business. He founded his own record label, and between different businesses, licensing, and endorsement deals, he piled up $500,000 in 2010. 50 Cent wanted all the nice things that money could get him, and not just to show off in his videos. He bought a 21-bedroom mansion from a down-on-his-luck celeb, who's number 4 on our list. He filled it with a fancy car collection, a disco, and a movie theater. When the housing market crashed in 2007, 50 Cent couldn't get out from under the expensive house. Not all his business panned out either. He'd lost money on a failed clothing line and a boxing promotion, to name a couple. Then came the lawsuits. 50 Cent got pounded for $2 million for not keeping up his end of a headphone licensing deal, and $5 million for buying and releasing a sex tape of his rival Rick Ross's girlfriend. In 2015, 50 Cent had to declare bankruptcy, and he lost the rights to most of his music to pay down his debts. Though he wanted people to know he didn't lose all his money, he's been paying it off since then, and he's worked his way back up to being a multi-millionaire. But 50 Cent didn't start the broke rapper game. He was just following the template laid out by our next celebrity. Number 5. MC Hammer. 30 years before 50 Cent, MC Hammer was the original, the trailblazer, when it came to rappers burning through absurd amounts of money. MC Hammer's hit, "You Can't Touch This," made him ubiquitous, and it made him really, really rich. And he spent almost $30 million on a mansion filled with all the opulence the 90s had to offer, from marble statues of himself to a gold hot tub and 2 swimming pools. He had 2 helicopters, one for each swimming pool, and 17 luxury cars. And when MC Hammer went somewhere, he took a 200-person entourage that cost him $500,000 a month. By 1996, that money was going out a lot faster than it was coming in, and those parachute pants didn't do anything to slow his fall. That's the year Hammer declared bankruptcy. He owed money to hundreds of people, not just banks and rental companies, but even his taxes and utilities. By the end of the 90s, MC Hammer was a symbol of a bygone era of too much. Our next celeb is connected to a few of the other stories we've covered already. Number 4. Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was a terrifying boxer in his prime. In 1986, he became the youngest fighter ever to win a heavyweight title. He tore through the competition and earned almost $400 million doing it. He even got to be the final boss in a classic Nintendo arcade game. While he was making money like crazy, he was spending it just as fast. Tyson bought a 21-bedroom mansion, one that we've already heard about, because when he had to sell it, 50 Cent was the one who bought it. Tyson spent as lavishly as anyone on this list. He dropped 6 figures on a gold chain. You might have even heard that Mike Tyson owned a tiger, but that's not true. He owned 3 tigers. He gave them up to a sanctuary after one of them mauled a woman who sneaked onto his property to play with them. While Mike Tyson could earn $30 million a fight, he might have kept up with his spending, but his bad behavior made that hard. Tyson was called the baddest man on the planet, and he could also be a pretty nasty guy. In 1992, Tyson was convicted of rape, and he spent 3 years in prison. Do you remember that poll in 1993 that said Dorothy Hamill was tied for the most popular athlete in America? Well, the same poll found that Mike Tyson was America's most unpopular athlete. When Tyson came out of prison, he launched a boxing comeback. He fought former champ Evander Holyfield, but lost. Tyson said the reason he lost was because Holyfield kept headbutting him, and the ref wasn't doing anything about it. So he did what any reasonable person would do. In the rematch, Tyson spit out his mouth guard and bit off a piece of Holyfield's ear. That was pretty much the end of people taking Tyson seriously as a boxer. He got his boxing license suspended for a year, and it's not like he had a lot of other marketable skills. In 2003, Mike Tyson was $23 million in debt, and he finally had to declare bankruptcy. But he managed to recover a bit since hitting bottom, unlike our next celeb. Number 3. Michael Jackson. They called Michael Jackson the king of pop, and it was hardly an exaggeration. From his time as a child star to one of the biggest record artists of the 20th century, he earned an estimated $4 billion. But by the time he died, he was deep in the red. Where did the money go? A lot of it went to his Neverland Ranch estate. He tricked out his home with a movie theater, 2 working train lines, and a menagerie that dwarfed Mike Tyson's with tigers, elephants, and a monkey named Bubbles. He was spending $30 million a year to keep it all up, and Jackson's creepy behavior didn't help his finances. In 1993, Michael Jackson paid $13 million to settle a lawsuit, accusing him of child molestation. What it all added up to was when he died in 2009, Michael Jackson's estate was $500 million in debt. I'm sorry about the turn that took at the end. You know, if you didn't already know about Michael Jackson's reputation. We're gonna see some more scummy behavior before we get to the end of this list. Number 2. Michael Vick. Our number 2 celeb, the 3rd consecutive Mike on our list, suffered the biggest fall from grace in football history. Michael Vick was one of the most promising quarterbacks ever when the Atlanta Falcons drafted him in 2001 with a $35 million signing bonus. Adding endorsements to his salary from playing football, he was making $25 million a year. But he spent that money, or gave it away to his friends, almost as fast as it came in. He was so bad with his money that his financial advisor gave up and quit on him. Maybe he would have been fine, as long as the sports hero money kept coming in, but that came to a sudden and shocking end. In 2007, Michael Vick got caught managing a dogfighting ring. He got sentenced to almost 2 years in jail. You can't play for the NFL from jail, and companies didn't want an animal abuser associated with their products. So the endorsement money went poof, too. The Atlanta Falcons sued to get back some of their signing bonus. Some sports agents sued for a slice of the endorsement money he'd been getting. Michael Vick had made over $100 million in a short career, but he had to declare bankruptcy before he was even out of prison. And once he was out of prison, he had to spend his football comeback paying off his debts. Losing $100 million because of your terrible crimes isn't cool. You know what is cool? Losing $1 billion. Number 1. Alex Jones. Alex Jones launched his InfoWars website in 2000, and over the next 20 years, he grew into the biggest name in far-right conspiracy media. By 2011, his online radio show had more listeners than Rush Limbaugh, the undisputed king of talk radio, and Glenn Beck put together. His show spread almost every kind of conspiracy theory you can think of, from 9/11 trutherism to vaccine denial to saying the moon landings had been faked. Between telling his listeners there was a secret sex dungeon under a Washington, D.C. pizza parlor, or the New World Order was using chemicals to turn people gay, he would advertise shady supplements and other dodgy products he promised would save you in the coming apocalypse. And people listened. InfoWars took in tens of millions of dollars a year in ad revenue and made hundreds of millions of dollars in sales. And if all that sounds a little irresponsible, it was. It was only a matter of time before Alex Jones got sued, and he got sued a lot. Often, he could make the lawsuit go away by apologizing for the lie on his show. It didn't seem to hurt Alex Jones's credibility with his listeners when he told them, actually, there's no dungeon underneath the pizza parlor. But there was one lie Alex Jones wouldn't quit, and that's the one that cost him. Alex Jones liked to say that school shootings were faked, and the kids and the parents involved were actors. This sucked quite a lot for the families of the kids who really had been killed, especially when Alex Jones's fans started targeting them with stalking, harassment, and death threats. Alex Jones was sued for defamation 5 separate times by different parents of victims of the Sandy Hook shooting. And his strategy for those trials was not to cooperate. He didn't share evidence with the court. He lied under oath. He badmouthed the judges on his show. In one defamation case in Texas, he was so uncooperative that he lost the case by default. He was ordered to pay $49 million to the plaintiffs. Then in another case in Connecticut, where Jones was being sued for 15 different plaintiffs, the jury really wasn't messing around. They ordered Alex Jones to pay $1.5 billion in damages. That's billion with a B. And Alex Jones was never a billionaire. In 2012, Alex Jones and InfoWars filed for bankruptcy, and the courts are doing their best to find all the money he's, let's be honest, probably hiding. Some of the celebs showed up in our other videos. If you want some more details about 50 Cent and MC Hammer's lavish lifestyles, and a lot more besides, check out our video on 16 rappers who went incredibly broke. As philosopher Biggie Smalls said, "Mo money, mo problems."
The more money you make, the more problems you get.
So let's look at 16 rappers who tried to solve that dilemma by losing all their money in the worst ways possible. Number 16, 6ix9ine. Our first rapper, Tekashi 6ix9ine, started out releasing his raps on SoundCloud. He didn't exactly get critical acclaim, but he had loads of fans, and a lot of money came with it. At his peak, 6ix9ine had at least $8 million.
That's a half a ticket right there.
And he spent it as flashily as he could on extravagant cars, jewelry, and grills. He even dropped $2 million on a McLaren P1. His custom jewelry collection included a platinum My Little Pony chain, encrusted with diamonds and topped with his own hair, supposedly worth $750,000. But 6ix9ine was caught up in all sorts of gang activity. In 2018, he got arrested on charges that could have seen him locked up until he was 69 years old. So he cut a plea deal and testified against the other members of his gang. His sentence was cut from 47 years to just 2. With 6ix9ine in jail, then house arrest for 2 years, the money stopped coming. And snitches get their sentences seriously reduced may be true, but it doesn't rhyme. 6ix9ine made some enemies, including fellow rappers Jim Jones and Cardi B, who he outed as gang members. 6ix9ine says he got held up by his former gang associates who stole his jewelry, including that 27-karat My Little Pony chain. Then in 2023, he got jumped in the locker room of an LA Fitness and had to get rushed to the hospital. Now that he's free, 6ix9ine is performing again. He collaborated with Nicki Minaj on a #1 hit. According to sources, his actual net worth is around $500,000 at the moment, Which, if you think about it, it's not enough to buy any of the crazy chains and grills he's addicted to. He's no millionaire anymore, although he totally claims to be on social media. Unlike our next guy, who apparently learned the lesson. Number 15. Scott Storch. Scott rose even higher and fell even faster. Hip-hop producer Scott Storch worked with artists like Jay-Z, Kanye West, Justin Timberlake, and Beyoncé. He stacked up $100 million, but in just 3 years, he'd spent 70 of it.
My monthly overhead for my household and household employees was somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million a month I was spending.
Storch collected fancy cars until he had 30 of them. He bought a mansion for $10.5 million. Then he dropped $20 million on a 7-bedroom yacht, because I guess his house was full of cars and he needed somewhere to sleep. But his most expensive habit was drugs. And it got so bad, he was getting high instead of working. In 2009, Scott Storch filed for bankruptcy. His mansion went up for auction and got bought by Birdman. We'll get to him later in the video. Storch was arrested a few times and filed for bankruptcy again in 2015. As of 2023, he's working again, but doesn't live like royalty anymore. His net worth is a modest $250,000. He could probably give some business advice to our next rappers, if they take it. Number 14. The Island Boys. The Island Boys are Floridian twins who go by the names Kodiak Red and Fly Soulja. These goofballs got famous in the far-off past of 2021 with their song, I'm an Island Boy.
I'm an island boy, and I've been trying to make. Oh, I'm an island boy.
It was really more of a viral meme than a song, but the video of them rapping in a hot tub got 9 million views before they deleted it. Of course, before they did, Kevin Hart and Snoop had something to say.
I'm an island boy, and I've been trying to make. Oh, I'm an island boy.
I'm speechless. Two goofballs in the pool.
You know why I'm not speechless?
Why?
Because I'm an island.
Later, however, they turned it into a proper music video. Since then, they've been recording more, songs and getting into feuds with various celebrities like YouTuber Logan Paul. That feud started on Logan Paul's podcast. Paul's co-host, George Janko, tried to give the pair some financial advice. He suggested if they sell their jewelry and invest the money, they could be set for life. The Island Boys didn't appreciate being talked to like, well, boys, and they stormed out of the podcast.
No, hold on. No, hold on.
Podcast.
No,
Here, I'm moving for you. I was giving you nice advice, bro.
I agree with that.
Let's hope they're willing to take financial advice from someone. Different sources have estimated their net worth at $700,000, up to as much as $2 million. But in a recent interview, their former manager suggested the Island Boys are completely broke and they owe him $150,000.
They owe me about like $150,000.
From what? Your percentage of the cameo money?
Yeah.
Is that the only money they're bringing in?
Mostly, maybe a little bit on TikTok, but I mean, it's pretty much run dry at this point.
Where'd the money go? Well, if they own all the cars they drive in their videos, that's almost $1 million right there. The Island Boys are still pretty young. They've got lots of time to make money, or crash and burn, or both, just like our next rapper on the list. Number 13, Fat Joe. Fat Joe has been there and done that, and wants to pass on what he learned. He was one of the first East Coast rappers to go solo, hitting it big with Flo Joe in '93. The money went out as fast as it came in. He says, I took private planes like it was a taxi cab.
The most money I ever lost was flying private planes.
He denied rumors that he owed unpaid taxes to the IRS. But in 2010, Fat Joe had made over $3 million in 2 years, and the IRS came after him for an unpaid tax bill of over $700,000. He paid up, but ended up going to prison for 4 months. You'd think Fat Joe would start doing things differently, but 6 years later, the IRS came after him again, saying he'd skipped out on paying another $1 million.
Woody would have got $1 million, man. His eyes would have, you think $1 million, that's it.
At least he's got a sense of humor about it.
I'm happy to see y'all looking great. Y'all shining. Be sure to know, the IRS see you shining too.
Today, Fat Joe's built his network back up to about $6 million. He tries to give young musicians the advice he didn't get coming up.
I do this every day on a daily basis. If I'm in the studio and the other top young rappers there, I sit down with them for an hour. And I let them know, yo, chill, this and this and that.
You see, they don't teach you how to do your taxes in rap school. Come to think of it, they never covered that in YouTube school either. Excuse me, I gotta check something. Whew, okay, where were we? Number 12, Ja Rule. Since his debut in 1999, Ja Rule won 4 Grammys and sold over 30 million records. Ja Rule was involved in a violent feud with Murder Inc. and got arrested on a weapons charge in 2007. Then in 2010, he got arrested again for trying to get a gun illegally. This time, he went to jail for 2 years. And while Ja Rule was beefing with other rappers, guess what he wasn't doing? Paying taxes. While he was on trial, it came out that Ja Rule owed $1 million in taxes. When they let Ja Rule out of prison for the weapon charge, they took him straight to state prison to do 6 more months for tax evasion. After that, Ja Rule helped run an ambitious music festival you might have heard of, the Fire Festival. In 2017, 500 people went to a Caribbean island expecting the music show of a lifetime. But the show didn't happen, and the guests ended up sleeping in disaster relief tents. Ja Rule's co-organizer got convicted of fraud. People who'd gone to the festival sued Ja Rule for $100 million. But that suit got thrown out because the judge said, basically, they couldn't prove it was Ja Rule's fault they'd bought tickets. So Ja Rule made it out of that one without losing everything. Today, he's got about $4 million. Did he learn anything from the Fire Festival? We'll see. Last year, he launched his new business, an NFT platform. But speaking of fraud, number 11, Tyga. Even if you don't know your rappers, you might recognize Tyga as Kylie Jenner's boyfriend on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. It turned out Tyga couldn't keep up. So he just kept buying new stuff instead of paying for his old stuff. In 2016, Tyga got hit for $1.3 million for not paying the rental on a Lamborghini and a Bentley. So, he bought himself a Ferrari and a Rolls Royce, but he didn't pay for those either, and they got repossessed. He got sued by a landlord for skipping a year's worth of rent, and he got sued by a jeweler for over $1 million in jewelry he borrowed without paying. At this point, you wonder if Tyga's even heard of bills, or if he just thinks lawsuits are how people pay for things. Tyga's reportedly worth about $7 million today, though he seems to spend money as fast as he makes it. Will he ever get ahead of his payments? He just bought his new girlfriend, Avril Lavigne, an $80,000 necklace, so probably not. But Tyga's definitely not the biggest rapper to show up on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. That honor goes to number 10, Kanye West. Kanye West, who goes by Ye now, has the honor of being the rapper on the list who lost the most money. Since the 2000s, Ye has been one of the most successful and influential artists alive. In 2022, Ye was the richest rapper in the world, with a net worth of $2 billion, with a B. Although, Ye might disagree with that math.
Now you're a $1 billion man walking around the streets. 10 billion, sorry, missed a couple numbers.
Back in 2016, though he tweeted asking Mark Zuckerberg for $1 billion for his projects, since he was $52 million in debt, personally. I guess with Kanye, you never know. He definitely has a history of unpredictable behavior, going back to the beginning of his career. In 2020, he decided to run for president. Since then, a lot of people think he's gone off the deep end. He started aligning himself with Donald Trump, which alienated a lot of fans. Then he started hanging out with anti-Semites and conspiracy nuts, which made him positively toxic. A lot of the companies he'd partnered with ran for the exits. When Adidas yanked its deal with Ye, that wiped out $1.5 billion off his net worth at once. As of 2023, Ye still has about $500 million to his name. So he's fabulously wealthy, but he has a lot farther left to fall if his reputation doesn't cover. For our next rapper, Let's go back to something smaller scale. Number 9. Lil' Kim. Lil' Kim's debut album went double platinum in 1996. She proved a woman could be a rap star and not just a dancer in other rappers' videos. In 2002, Lil' Kim bought a mansion in New Jersey for $2.3 million. But then she ran into trouble with the law, and the money slowed down. Lil' Kim was in over her head. She owed over $1 million in taxes and $650,000 on her house. Keeping up with that house and her career, Lil' Kim was spending $2,000 a month on staff, $2,000 on wardrobe, and a whopping $10,000 a month on travel expenses. All those bills, and she was only making $18,000 a month. To stop creditors from taking her house, Lil' Kim filed for bankruptcy. She had to reorganize her finances. In 2019, Lil' Kim said she'd finally gotten things under control, and she withdrew her bankruptcy claim. Today, she only has $500,000 to her name. That's peanuts for a superstar rapper. But you know what? She kept the house, and she's doing better than our next guy. Number 8. Trick Daddy. Trick Daddy came out of Miami in the late 90s. His career took off, and at his peak, he was worth about $6 million. But in the 2010s, the tricks weren't coming as fast as they used to. Trick Daddy released his last mixtape back in 2012. His expenses started catching up with him. Trick Daddy kept going bankrupt, falling behind on his payment plans, and going bankrupt again. In bankruptcy number 3 in 2017, he filed to stop creditors from taking his house. He said he had no cash, nothing in the bank, but he owed $57,000 in child support, $280,000 on the house, and even more in back taxes. Bankruptcy number 4 was in 2022. This time, he was $100,000 underwater on his house and $800,000 in debt overall, with nothing in the bank. Since that bankruptcy, Trick Daddy is scraping by with a net worth of about $150,000. Some people can't seem to turn it around. Could our next rapper? Number 7. Lil Bibby. He released his mixtape in 2013 and started getting buzz while he was still in high school. Now that he was a rapper, he started spending money like he thought he was supposed to. It got to where he was spending $7,000 a month just on clothes to keep up with the Joneses.
And I'm like, man, I'm spending about $6-7 grand at least.
Eventually, fellow rapper Kevin Gates took Lil Bibby aside and explained that this was crazy. Lil Bibby learned that by wearing clothes more than once sometimes, he could keep his monthly clothing budget in the low triple digits. Lil Bibby retired from rapping at the ripe old age of 23 to start his own label with his brother. He also started investing in real estate. Now he says, I like to make people a lot of money. I got enough knowledge, and I've studied this rap stuff, and I got enough relationships to help an artist, help his family. I get a kick out of it because I see how the label does it and my situation. I feel like just helping people.
So I'm only doing this to promote my company, my artists. So, you know, that's what I do it for.
Today, he's got about $10 million to his name. But things could have got a lot worse for Lil Bibby if he hadn't learned to manage his money better. And let's hope he stays out of trouble. Unlike number 6, Da Brat. Shantae Harris, better known as Da Brat. In 1994, her album Functified was the first album by a solo female rapper to sell 1 million copies. She had a great career, working with Lil Kim, Mariah Carey, Destiny's Child, and more. But in 2007, Da Brat was at a Halloween party at a nightclub when she got into it with a waitress. And by got into it, I mean she whacked the waitress in the head with a glass bottle. That's more than a party foul. Da Brat spent almost 2 years in jail for assault. When she got out, the waitress sued her and won $6.5 million. This is where Da Brat filed for bankruptcy. She told a judge she didn't have $6 million to pay the lawsuit. She didn't even have $1 million. She had $100,000 and owed almost $8 million. A few years later, Da Brat seemed to be doing all right. She came out as bisexual and married businesswoman Jessica Dupart. Da Brat's net worth is currently around $3 million. Maybe her wife can give her investment tips so she doesn't have the same problems as our next rapper. Number 5. Birdman. Byron "Birdman" Williams co-founded Cash Money Records in 1992, and in the 2010s, Forbes magazine called him one of the 5 richest rappers with over $110 million. But when you have that kind of money, everyone wants you to invest in their next thing. And not every rapper knows how to pick a winner. In early 2010, Birdman announced he was starting an oil drilling business. He even got an oil pump jack tattooed on his head to celebrate. But by that March, he'd covered up that tattoo, and the company was nowhere to be found. Then Birdman took out a $12 million loan to start a vodka company. But in 2017, the lender sued him and said he'd use the money to pay his other bills instead of making vodka. That lender ended up taking Birdman's house, the house he bought from Scott Storch, and everything in it, even his platinum records. Birdman had to go back to court to stop them from taking the royalties from his music too. Despite all that though, he's currently sitting on a net worth of $160 million. Our next rapper also made some questionable investments, but could he recover? Number 4. T-Pain. In the 2000s, T-Pain and his auto-tune voice were absolutely everywhere. He was putting out hits of his own. He went platinum alongside Flo Rida. He was on a boat with The Lonely Island. And as we've seen with all our stories so far, once the good times start, they never stop, right?
Everybody before me that I had to look up to, they were just like, no, this is great. Once you start rapping, it's just money all the time. Nothing bad's ever gonna happen. Your family's not gonna come after you. Just rap, and it's just girls and swimming pools after this.
T-Pain made about $40 million, but he wasn't even counting it before he spent it. He spent $2 million at once on a Bugatti, and he started investing in real estate, buying broken down houses so he can fix them up and flip them. Because in 2007, real estate was another party where the good times were never going to stop.
I think this is the most significant financial crisis in the post-war period.
Ah, right, the Great Recession. All that money in real estate was as good as gone. T-Pain was in financial pain. He says at one point, he had to borrow money just to take his kids to Burger King.
When you say you was broke, you had like $0 broke?
I had to borrow money to get my kids Burger King.
But T-Pain chose that name because of his hard childhood growing up in Tallahassee, and he stuck it out again. He's not as big as he was at his peak, but T-Pain's kept singing. He even won the first season of The Masked Singer. And now he's worth about $10 million. But losing track of your money is a problem as old as rap itself. And one of the rap's biggest financial disasters is also one of its first breakout stars. Number 3. MC Hammer. Stanley Burrell, aka MC Hammer, was on top of the world when his album Please Hammer, Don't Hurt 'Em came out in 1990. MC Hammer was everywhere. He even had a Saturday morning cartoon. MC Hammer had an estimated net worth of $33 million, and the ways he spent it were as wild as you'd expect from the guy who made parachute pants famous. He bought a mansion and spent $30 million tricking it out. The place had a gold hot tub and marble statues, a movie theater, bowling alley, tennis court, basketball court, and baseball field. He had a swimming pool shaped like his signature Hammer pants, and another swimming pool shaped like a swimming pool. With a house like that, I'd never go anywhere. But MC Hammer had 17 luxury cars, 2 helicopters, a jet, and 31 racehorses. He was apparently addicted to modes of transportation. He went around with a 200-person entourage that cost him $500,000 a month. There was no way to keep that up. MC Hammer declared bankruptcy in 1996. He owed money to the hundreds of people, including stores, banks, limo rental companies, lawyers, utilities, and the IRS. And just when you think Hammer had kept his head down long enough, in 2011, the IRS came after him again for almost $780,000 in unpaid taxes, going back to 1996. Today, MC Hammer is estimated to have about $2 million, a far cry from where he was in the 90s. But spending too much is just one way a rapper can go bust. Number 2. DMX. DMX is the only rapper on this list to record 5 #1 albums and file for bankruptcy 3 times. His first album sold 250,000 copies in its first week. He'd end up selling 74 million albums over a 36-year career, but he never got stable enough to enjoy all his earnings. DMX had a rough childhood. He got addicted to hard drugs while he was still a teenager, and he'd been in and out of jail 30 times for different crimes. It's kind of a miracle he had time to rap. He also had 17 children with 11 different women, and that was one habit he couldn't afford. When DMX filed for bankruptcy in 2013, he owed $1.24 million in child support, and he only had $50,000 to pay with. He filed for bankruptcy again in 2016. This time, he owed more than $2 million. He said he didn't have any cash or cars, or even any furniture. Even worse, the IRS came after him for tax fraud. At this point, you knew that one was coming, right? This sad story has a sad ending. DMX relapsed and went to prison. He got out in 2019. 2 years later, he overdosed and died. DMX never wrote a will, so if he had any money, his 17 kids will have a tough time ever getting any. But let's move on from there to our number 1 story. Number 1, 50 Cent. Hardly anyone in the rap game has risen higher, fallen further, or come back stronger. I'm talking about 50 Cent. 50 Cent released his first major label album in 2003 called Get Rich or Die Tryin'. And one thing he can say is he did not die trying. He made enough off that album to buy a 50,000 square foot mansion from Mike Tyson for $4 million. The house had 21 bedrooms and 37 bathrooms. It came with all the necessities, like a racquetball court, a movie theater, and a disco. In 2010, 50 Cent was worth a cool $500 million. He'd gone into a bunch of businesses, earning close to $100 million promoting vitamin water and over $70 million licensing luxury underwear. Then in 2015, he filed for bankruptcy. How did that happen? Well, 50 Cent was a big spender. In an interview with The Guardian, he said, "If you don't want nice things in your life, I don't even want to know you." He drove 4 Chevys, a Rolls Royce, a Dodge Sprinter, a Suzuki, and a Bentley. But his biggest expense probably came from that house. 37 bathrooms don't clean themselves. It turns out he tried to sell it back in 2007. But remember 2007? T-Pain couldn't sell his houses, and 50 Cent wasn't going to sell his. Not all 50 Cent's businesses panned out either. 50 Cent lost money trying to start a boxing promotion, a movie production company, and a clothing line. But the knockout punch was a series of lawsuits. He feuded with Rick Ross, so he bought and released a sex tape of Ross's girlfriend. She sued him and won $5 million. Then he got sued over a failed deal to make headphones, $2 million. Oh, and he stole the headphone design from someone. Another lawsuit, $17 million. In 2015, 50 Cent owed $32 million and said he only had $23 million. When he filed for bankruptcy, he told the judge most of his cars and bling he showed off were borrowed. In the bankruptcy, he lost most of the rights to his own music, and he ended up suing his own lawyers for making such a bad deal. Since then, 50 Cent's been slowly paying off the rest of his debts, but he released a new album and produced other albums and some TV shows. 50 Cent is back up to $40 million. It's less than a tenth of what he had at his peak. But let's not lose perspective. It's a lot more than 50 cents. That's 16 rappers we just saw rise and fall, and sometimes rise again. I hope we've learned a few lessons, like don't let appearances fool you, and pay your taxes, and try not to get sued too much. But there are always more wild stories coming out of show business. In the next videos, we're going over celebrities who completely destroyed their careers in a matter of seconds. Tragic stories of 15 rock stars whose fortunes came crashing down. Embezzlement, legal battles, lavish lifestyles, and ill-fated investments led them to financial ruin. Number 15. Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent, the Motor City madman, was riding high on success. He sold out shows across America, and he was raking in a substantial amount of cash. But sometimes your wealth is at the mercy of those you trust. Unfortunately for Ted, his managers made some disastrous financial decisions, and this was just the beginning of his downfall. Ted's assets were poured into a series of failing businesses. This even included an unlikely investment in a mink farm. Yeah, you heard that right, a mink farm. A far cry of a smart financial move. As fate would have it, these ill-fated ventures pushed Ted to file for bankruptcy in 1980. Who would have thought that a rock star's downfall could be attributed to a failed mink farm? But that was just the tip of the iceberg for Ted. He purchased a herd of Clydesdale and even ventured into the world of hotels with a catastrophic acquisition in Flint, Michigan. Ted Nugent later blamed his financial managers for these reckless investments. However, despite his bankruptcy setback, he managed to bounce back financially. He was lucky that these crazy financial mishaps couldn't pull him down. While Ted Nugent's financial difficulties were indeed unusual, the next rock star on this list took a different path to financial ruin. Number 14. Isaac Hayes. Isaac Hayes, the soulful crooner, became renowned for the iconic theme song of Shaft. He enjoyed immense success in the early 70s. But his record label, Stax, began experiencing financial troubles. And Isaac realized he was in a risky situation. To make matters worse, he was also deeply indebted to his bank, and a lawsuit demanding over $5 million was filed against his label. He was unable to fulfill his obligations. Therefore, Stax agreed to release Isaac Hayes from his recording contract, with his royalty payments redirected to the bank. In an attempt to turn his fortune around, he ventured into establishing his own record label. He even invested in the Memphis Tams, a professional basketball team. Sadly, his label releases failed to resonate with audiences, and as for the basketball team, it struggled to generate profits. At this point, the financial pressure became overwhelming. This forced Isaac Hayes to file for bankruptcy in 1976. He was burdened with a debt exceeding $6 million. He lost his home and the rights to most of his music. However, Isaac didn't let the setback define him. He tried to rebuild a new career as an actor, and he hit the mark. Isaac Hayes managed to overturn his struggles, but the next rock star on this list faced a betrayal he couldn't have imagined. Number 13. Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen had an illustrious career filled with critical acclaim and financial success. Having achieved everything he dreamt of, Leonard stepped back in the 2000s, and he entrusted all his finances to a trustworthy companion. Little did Leonard know that his longtime manager, Kelly Lynch, was about to betray him. She embezzled over $5 million from him. And that's not all. Kelly also secretly sold off a significant portion of his publishing rights. In pursuit of justice, Leonard took legal action against Kelly, which went on for years. This had a significant financial burden on him. In a twist of fate, Leonard decided to return to touring, and this marked his comeback after 15 years. Fans were delighted to see their idol perform after a long break. The tour was an instant success and brought in much-needed cash. It was reported that Leonard made an impressive $85.7 million from the tour from 2008 to 2010. And justice eventually prevailed. The court ruled in Leonard's favor and ordered Kelly Lynch to repay him $9.5 million. Next up, we have a music legend who found himself entangled in a tax crisis of epic proportions. Number 12. Willie Nelson. Even for a beloved country icon like Willie Nelson, taxes are an inescapable reality. Unfortunately, Willie and his accountants seem to have missed the memo, and the IRS came in 1990 to wake them up. They reached Willie's home and presented a jaw-dropping sum of $32 million in unpaid taxes. This was a shock for him. Willie Nelson pointed at some investments he was advised to make, laying blame for a portion of the problem. However, the blame game didn't help. The rock star was left with no choice. so he sold off his assets to meet his tax obligations. But that wasn't enough. He even had to record a double album, aptly titled The IRS Tapes. Who Will Buy My Memories? All profits from the albums were dedicated entirely to repaying his outstanding tax debt. Finally, by 1993, Willie managed to clear his debts. Number 11. Cyndi Lauper. Cyndi Lauper just wanted to rise to fame, but her financial woes had a different idea. Believe it or not, her brush with bankruptcy happened before she skyrocketed to fame. Talk about bad timing. During the early days of her career, Cyndi was part of a group called Blue Angel. They released their debut album in 1980. Sadly, it didn't quite strike a chord with the masses. The band called it quits, and to add insult to injury, their former manager decided to sue Cyndi for a whopping $80,000. Facing this mountain of debt, Cyndi Lauper did what she had to do to make ends meet. She took on various jobs and hustled like a champ. She worked in a retail store and as a waitress at IHOP. Who would have thought? But fate had a surprise in store for Cyndi. In 1983, her debut solo album, She's So Unusual, hit the shelves, and boom, it exploded into a massive success, catapulting her into stardom. With her newfound fame and fortune, she kissed her remaining debt goodbye, and she continued on her path to a remarkable career. Now, Cyndi's comeback deserves a huge round of applause, unlike the next legend, whose financial woes were a result of a complex and troubled journey. Number 10. Sly Stone. When it comes to mind-boggling money troubles, funk legend Sly Stone takes center stage. The man had it all, an IRS lien on his house that seemed to last longer than a never-ending bass groove, a notorious drug problem that cost him a fortune, and let's not forget that he also sold off his publishing rights to patch up his debts. Adding fuel to the fire, Sly became entangled in an endless legal clash with his former manager. He accused him of diverting millions in royalties over a period of more than 20 years. It was a total hit and run on his finances. His financial state was spiraling out of control, and Sly couldn't afford a roof over his head. He was forced to live in a van parked in the streets of Los Angeles in 2011. A true rock and roll tragedy. In a surprising twist of fate, 4 years later, Sly Stone emerged victorious, and he won the $5 million lawsuit against his former manager. Coming up is the tale of a rock star whose mental illness almost made him broke. Number 9. Roky Erickson. Roky Erickson, the maestro of psychedelic sounds, with the 13th floor elevators, seemed destined to soar to new heights. However, fate had a different trajectory in mind for Roky. He was caught with a single marijuana joint in 1969, and he faced a potential 10-year sentence. But he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and decided to plead not guilty because of insanity. That's when Roky Erickson went off to a psychiatric hospital, where his life took a wild detour. Gone were the days of melodic tunes. All of that was replaced by the jarring echoes of an electroshock therapy and the numbing effects of Thorazine treatments. While Roky was under the hospital's care, his finances suffered a devastating blow. By the time he was released from custody in 1972, he was left with nothing. But he wasn't going to stay down. He formed a new band called Roky Erickson and the Aliens, and he rose to prominence in the mid-90s. He enjoyed the spotlight till his death in 2019. Unlike Roky's remarkable comeback, the story of this next artist's love life and financial battles is tragic and has a lasting impact. Number 8. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye was an enchanting singer who mesmerized audiences with his soul-stirring performances. However, behind the scenes, his love life unfolded like a Shakespearean tragedy, with dire consequences for his financial stability. Back in 1963, Marvin tied the knot with Anna Gordy, the older sister of Motown founder Berry Gordy. Sounds like a match made in musical heaven, right? Well, think again. Their love story took an unexpected turn as the relationship transformed into a bitter composition of adultery and abuse. The couple separated in 1973, but the divorce drama didn't end there. Marvin was ordered to pay a hefty sum of $600,000 to his former wife. Now here's the twist. He fell behind on those alimony payments. You must be wondering why. It was all thanks to Marvin's spending habits. Lavish lifestyle? Check. Spending on drugs, cars, and property? Double check. Adding salt to the wound, his once soaring popularity rapidly declined. And in these desperate times, Marvin filed for bankruptcy. He even agreed to give Anna Gordy the royalties from his 1978 album, Here My Dear. But let's just say that album didn't exactly set the charts on fire. Despite the rocky road, Marvin was optimistic as he released his 1982 album, Midnight Love. This was his career resurgence. He tragically passed away in 1984, and he reportedly still owed Anna close to a whopping $300,000. Love hurts, both in the heart and the bank account. Next up is the rocker who fell prey to his own lavish lifestyle. Number 7, John Oates. John Oates went from riches to rags. In 1987, he got hit with a reality check. The man who had sold over 80 million records worldwide suddenly found himself broke. Well, John had a taste for the finer things in life. Private planes, multiple homes, and antique cars were just a few of his extravagant purchases. Living the high life, indeed. But he somehow forgot that living like a rock star comes with a price tag. And oh boy, it hit him hard. John was blinded by his own success. By the time he came to terms with his lavish spending, it was too late. He even blamed his trusted manager, Tommy Mottola, and his lawyer, Alan Grubman, saying that they were supposed to be keeping his finances in check. Debt had John in a tight grip. The only asset he had was the $50 in his wallet. Fortunately, Hall & Oates came to the rescue, recovering millions of dollars in unpaid royalties. John Oates' fall from riches to rags served as a reminder of the financial risks artists face. Now, let's uncover the financial hardships of the British bad boy. Number 6, Pete Doherty. The founder of the Libertines band, Pete Doherty was a heartthrob and a rebellious soul. His bad boy antics didn't just affect his personal life, they took a toll on his bank account too. Pete's drug use and jail time were way out of control, so his group banned him from playing. Instead of learning a lesson from it, he did something unexpected. He started another band, Baby Shambles, in 2003. But here's the twist. Pete's financial situation wasn't exactly rock star worthy. In 2007, reports surfaced that he was on the verge of bankruptcy. Despite earning millions from his music, leaked accounts showed that his companies were barely making a profit. One of them made $2,500, while his touring company actually lost $28,000. Now, you might be thinking, well, surely the rockstar life was a blast, right? Not quite. Turns out, Pete's investments didn't exactly hit the jackpot either. Poof, all that money seemed to have vanished into thin air. But Pete had a saving grace in the form of supermodel Kate Moss. Her wealth was a lifeline for him. He found refuge in her luxurious mansion. Kate even generously financed his rehab. Ah, love and money. What a combo. However, as time went on, so did Kate Moss. By 2010, tabloids claimed that Pete was completely broke and living in a squalid basement apartment. But the story took a turn for the better. The Libertines reformed, and their reunion was a lucrative opportunity. They earned a staggering $2 million by performing just 2 festival gigs. Not everyone is lucky enough, like Pete, to get a career resurgence. The next icon faced embezzlement at the hands of his own manager. Number 5, Harry Nilsson. Harry Nilsson was the talk of the town back in the late 60s and early 70s. This guy was on fire. He made it to the cover of Time magazine and had the Beatles as his fans. Talk about rubbing shoulders with the greats. Sure, his albums may not have topped the charts, but who needs that? When you've got 2 Grammy Awards and a cool $5 million record deal under your belt before hitting the big 3-0, Harry's career went down the road in the 80s, and things were about to get worse. His business manager, Cindy Sims, stole millions of dollars from him. Poor Harry Nilsson went to bed one night with a financially secure family, and he woke up the next morning with $300 in his bank account. Cindy even removed foreclosure notices from Harry's doorstep to hide his financial situation. Can you believe the audacity? Left with no alternative, Harry declared bankruptcy. It's a sad tale indeed. The story doesn't end there. Tragically, Nilsson passed away in 1994 due to heart failure, and he left behind a legacy overshadowed by financial betrayal. Stay tuned for another betrayal story, with the central character being a close one. Number 4. Billy Joel. Billy Joel was rocking his era with chart-topping hits, and you'd think that being one of the best-selling musicians would come with its own financial fairy tale. Well, that wasn't the case here. Frank Weber, Billy's former brother-in-law, manager, and godfather to his daughters, stabbed him in the back. He stole money from him. And that wasn't all. He invested the money in risky ventures. Fortunately, the true motives of Frank Weber were revealed during a financial audit. And as for Billy, well, he couldn't believe his ears. His once trusted brother-in-law had been siphoning off a staggering amount of money from his accounts. And this wasn't just a few bucks. We're talking about $10 million worth of investments going down the drain. Billy's copyrights were mortgaged without permission. His shrewd manager even used clever accounting tricks to keep him in the dark. And on top, Frank was even making $20 million in commissions from Billy Joel. It was a double cross. Billy was devastated, and he sued Frank Weber for $90 million. But the saga took an unexpected twist. Frank filed for bankruptcy, leaving Billy Joel just hanging there. Now moving on to the next rock star, who hit the financial wall with a resounding crash. Number 3. Dee Snider. Dee Snider was an icon in the 80s, and his music videos went viral even before YouTube even existed. Life was sweet for him. He was swimming in cash like a rock and roll tycoon. But then, disaster struck. The Senate summoned him to defend his music videos against accusations of violence. And what did he do? He tried to win over the stiff politicians by claiming he was a clean-cut, upright family man. Dee even told them that he never touched a drop of alcohol and never even thought of doing drugs. Well, guess what? That move backfired big time. His fans started doubting his credibility, and Dee Snider's career was over. Dee went broke because he lost his hard-earned reputation. The next music legend, despite having earned enough money, lost it to his lavish spending habits. Number 2. Lemmy Kilmister. Lemmy Kilmister was the living definition of rock and roll. Motorhead's legendary lead singer had a career that stretched across generations. You would imagine a man like him to have amassed immense riches like Scrooge McDuck in his money bin, right? Well, the reality was quite different. The initial estimation of Lemmy's estate at the time of his passing was a whopping $8.3 million. And here comes the punchline. The final court revealed a meager $648,000. Now, don't get me wrong, that's still a respectable sum. However, considering the sheer magnitude of rock and roll power Lemmy had, this seemed like nothing. But hey, that's because he lavishly spent his hard-earned cash. He was the very definition of excessive living as a rock star. For decades, he indulged in a legendary love for speed and alcohol. He even had an extensive collection of German war memorabilia. Lemmy was living a life on his own terms. And who could blame him? When you're the godfather of rock and roll, you deserve to treat yourself, even if it means parting ways with a significant chunk of your fortune. Now, let's explore the financial troubles of this last rock star, who, to this day, is fighting a legal battle. Number 1. George Clinton. George Clinton, the funk legend, had his fair share of financial turmoil in the 80s. Trouble came knocking when he crossed paths with Bridgeport Music. The music publishing company swooped in and acquired the rights to many of Clinton's beloved songs. Sneaky devils they were. George filed for bankruptcy in 1985. He left out the songs he had written between 76 and 83 as potential sources of future income. The Parliament claimed that the bankruptcy filing was fraudulent, and even his signature was forged. Unfortunately, the decision was ruled in favor of Bridgeport Music, and they were declared proud owners of George's music copyrights, valued at $100 million. But the rock and roll legend didn't give up. To this day, he continues to fight for his rights. And in this ongoing legal battle, he had to sell off the rights to some of his other songs to pay the legal fees. And it's not just rock stars who get blinded by money. Celebrities have also fallen into this pitfall. Don't just take our word for it. Check out the stories of how some famous celebrities went broke. Click the video on your screen now to watch and learn from their mistakes.